They erased me from the family but forgot about the one secret Dad left behind. As the car rolled away from the familiar street, its engine a low hum in the piercing silence, my mind was no longer in that suffocating dining room. The chill of the December air seeping through the vents was nothing compared to the ice that had settled in my heart. My thoughts drifted, escaping to another time, another Christmas. A warmer one. Back then, the house smelled of my father, Arthur Vance, a comforting mix of oak shavings and machine oil. He was a carpenter, a man whose hands were calloused but gentle, who could build anything from a bookshelf to a sense of security. I remembered him handing me my first hammer, a small one with a worn wooden handle. "It's about resilience, Alara," he'd said, his voice rumbling like a distant friendly thunder. "You hit a nail wrong, you don't throw the hammer away. You pull the nail out and try again. You've got that resilience in you." And Leo, he wasn't the cold stranger carving the ham. He was the boy who built a snow fort with me in the backyard, one so high we thought we'd reach the clouds. I remember slipping on a patch of ice, busting my lip open. He cried harder than I did. He half carried me inside, shouting for our mom, his face streaked with tears and panic as he wrapped me in a wool blanket. "You're not allowed to die," he'd whispered fiercely, his little hands gripping my shoulders. Ever. Where did that boy go? My mother Helen used to sing off-key hymns and pop songs while she cooked, twirling in her slippers when she thought no one was looking. But I always was. She was the one who made sure my favorite mug, the one with the faded holly leaves, was always waiting with hot cocoa piled high with marshmallows after a day of playing in the snow. I didn't see the mug this year. I hadn't expected to, but I still looked for it. It all started to change when Dad got sick. The laughter in the house grew thin, the warmth receded. It wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow, creeping frost. Leo stepped up, or rather, he stepped in. It was all under the guise of protection. "We can't stress him out," he'd say. My calls to Dad started going through him. "Dad, he's resting right now, Alara. I'll let him know you called." A few days later, he's in a bit of a fog today. Not a great time. Eventually, I stopped hearing my father's voice altogether. Just filtered updates from Leo, always wrapped in a tone of solemn duty. My mother deferred to him completely. "Leo's been such a help," she'd sigh, avoiding my gaze. "He just knows how to handle things. It's easier this way." Easier for whom? The small erasures began. One year, my Christmas stocking, the one I'd needle-pointed myself in the third grade, was missing from the fireplace mantel. Later, I found the framed photo of me and Dad. The day he gave me his old toolbox had vanished from the hallway wall. In its place was a new glossy picture of Leo and my cousin Chloe at a garden center, holding a flat of bright yellow mums. They looked like the proud saviors of the family homestead. I told myself these things didn't mean anything, that I was being too sensitive. But the feeling of being slowly written out of my own life was impossible to ignore. A few weeks after that hollow Christmas dinner, while packing away some old winter clothes I'd left at the house, I finally found it. My stocking. It was crumpled and shoved in the back of a linen closet behind a stack of musty towels. An afterthought. As I pulled it out, my fingers brushed against something small and hard inside. It wasn't an old piece of candy. I reached in and pulled out a single old-fashioned key, its brass body cold and tarnished with age. I had no idea what it was for, or what lock it might open. I stood there, the key resting heavy in my palm, a tiny piece of a puzzle I didn't understand. Just then, my phone buzzed, a sharp sound in the quiet room. A text from an old neighbor. "Thought you might want to see this," it read. Below the text, a photo loaded sharp and painfully clear. It was a picture of a party, a family party from the night before. And in the center of it, standing in my mother's kitchen wearing her favorite apron, was Chloe. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. The photo on my phone was sharp and painfully clear. It wasn't just that Chloe was in my mother's kitchen. It was that she was wearing my mother's favorite floral apron, the one with the faded bluebells. She was laughing, her head thrown back as if she hadn't a care in the world, as if she belonged. My world tilted on its axis. I waited a week, letting the anger cool into a hard, cold stone in my stomach before I called. I needed to hear it for myself. I was expecting my mother's voice, but the one that answered was bright, cheerful, and utterly wrong. Vance residence. It was Chloe. My breath hitched. "Chloe, it's Alara. Is my mom there?" "Oh, hey," she chirped, oblivious. "Hold on, your mom's elbow deep in pie dough." Your mom. The two words echoed in the sudden silence, a chasm opening between me and the life I once knew. The phrase sat in my chest for days, heavy and suffocating. When I finally got my mother, Helen, on the phone, I tried to keep my voice even free of accusation. So is Chloe staying with you now? Oh, she's been an absolute godsend, Alara, Helen said, her voice laced with a relief that stung more than any anger could have. You know how things have been. She just takes care of everything. A godsend. This was the same Chloe who 3 years ago borrowed mom's sapphire earrings and later claimed she thought they were a gift. The same Chloe who cried on our porch after being caught lying about a missing checkbook at Thanksgiving, sobbing, I don't know why everyone always thinks I'm the bad one. Now here she was, the family savior, the perfect replacement. It became her house, my house. She left handwritten notes on the fridge, chicken in the oven, took mom to physical therapy. When I sent flowers for my mother's birthday, it was Chloe who texted me a photo of mom holding them. Chloe's arms slung proprietorially around her shoulders. She loved them. Great day, the caption read. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't in any pictures anymore. The final brutal confirmation came at Dad's memorial. I walked through the door of the funeral home, my heart a leaden weight, and the first person I saw was Chloe, standing by the entrance greeting guests, as if she were the bereaved daughter. She was wearing a simple black dress. My simple black dress. I recognized the way the hem fell just above the knee, the slight fraying on the sleeve I'd meant to fix. I had left it in the upstairs closet. It wasn't hers. I watched, feeling like a ghost, as she poured cider and told stories about my father, intimate little anecdotes that made people nod and smile sadly. She charmed them. They believed her. Her fingers kept straying to a small silver compass that hung around her neck, a piece of jewelry I'd never seen before. She would twist it between her thumb and forefinger, a nervous, repetitive gesture that seemed completely at odds with her confident performance. Later that evening, numb and hollowed out, I found my mother by the window. I had to know. I just had to hear her say it. Mom? I started, my voice barely a whisper. It feels like Chloe is... Helen turned and her face was a mask of weary impatience. Alara, don't start. She's just trying to help. You've always been too sensitive about things. And that was it. The final blow. It wasn't that they had forgotten me in their grief. It was colder, more calculated than that. They had found someone easier, someone more convenient, someone who wasn't me. It was a deliberate act of replacement. I looked at my mother, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman who sang off key while cooking. I saw a stranger who was defending the person who had stolen my life. I left without another word. The anger and the hurt I'd been feeling for months finally coalesced into something else. Something hard and clear. Resolve. I had to go back to the house. Unannounced. I had to see it for myself. 2 months later, on a quiet afternoon, I drove back to the old house. I hadn't called ahead. I wasn't planning on confrontation, not yet. I just needed to see it, to sit in the driveway and look at the porch swing where my father taught me how to tie knots, and maybe remember who I was before I became a ghost. But as I pulled up, the driveway was empty. No sign of Leo's oversized truck or Chloe's sensible sedan. The house was still. My old key still worked. I stepped inside, and the silence was unnerving. Not peaceful, but hollow. The air was different, scrubbed clean of the familiar scent of Dad's pipe tobacco and Mom's lavender polish. Everything felt slightly off, like a movie set, designed to look like my childhood home, but missing its soul. The furniture had been rearranged just enough to feel alien, but I found myself drifting down the hall, drawn toward the one room I knew they wouldn't have touched, my father's study. It was a sanctuary of dust and memory. The air was thick with the scent of old books and sawdust. His worn leather recliner still sagged in the middle, a perfect impression of him left behind. His old paint-chipped toolbox sat under the bookshelf, and in the corner stood the dark wooden cabinet. I'd seen him open it 1,000 times, but never paid much mind to what he kept inside. As I knelt before it, my fingers grazed the pocket of my coat, and I felt the cold, hard shape of the old brass key from the Christmas stocking. A sudden, impossible thought struck me. It couldn't be. With trembling hands, I pulled out the key and pushed it into the lock. It slid in smoothly. I turned it. A loud metallic clunk echoed in the silent room. The cabinet door swung open. My heart hammered against my ribs. Inside, there was no treasure. just stacks of old invoices and schematics. My hope faltered, but then I saw it pushed to the back beneath a pile of receipts, a small gray metal box, and it was locked. Of course it was. Defeated. I almost gave up, but then another memory flickered faint at first, then sharp and clear. Dad sitting in his recliner, a book in his lap. He was laughing about something, telling me you should always hide things in plain sight. His favorite book, The Great Gatsby. I shot up and scanned the shelves, my eyes racing over the titles. There it was, a worn copy with a cracked spine. I pulled it down my fingers, shaking as I fanned the pages, and something small and silver fell into my palm. A tiny key. I knelt on the floor again, the metal box in my lap. The tiny key fit. With a soft click, the lid popped open. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Old coins. A forgotten keepsake. But it was just an envelope. A thick, cream-colored envelope. And on the front, written in my father's familiar, steady script, was my name, Elora. I sat there on the dusty floor, my knees pulled to my chest, and opened it. The first document was thick legal paper. A notarized will dated just 2 weeks before he died. My eyes scanned the text, blurring through the legal jargon until they landed on the damning, beautiful truth. Every asset, the house, the savings, the small plot of land he loved was left to me. Only me. Leo's name wasn't mentioned. Neither was Chloe's. Tucked behind the will was another piece of paper, a single sheet folded in half its edges, slightly yellowed. It was a letter. Alara, it began. I see it now. I didn't before, and for that I am so sorry. You never asked for anything. You just gave. You protected me when you thought no one was looking. Leo is loud, but you are strong. This house is yours. You've earned it. Love, Dad. I didn't cry at his funeral. I cried on that floor. Hot, silent tears streamed down my face, not for the house, not for the money, but for the recognition. For the 5 simple words that gave me back my life. I see it now. In the end, someone saw me. The grief and anger that had been my constant companions for so long washed away, replaced by something new. A calm, quiet purpose. I carefully folded the letter, slid it and the will back into the envelope, and stood up. I knew exactly what I had to do. Christmas Eve came again. I returned to the house, but this time I wasn't a hopeful guest seeking a place at the table. I was a messenger. I didn't knock. I let myself in and walked toward the dining room, the sounds of forced laughter and clinking glasses growing louder. The scene was a perfect haunting echo of the year before. Leo sat at the head of the table, playing the part of the patriarch. Chloe was to his right, her hand resting on his arm. My mother, Helen, sat opposite, a soft, distant smile on her face. And once again, there was no seat for me. This time, I didn't flinch. I walked forward, my steps steady on the hardwood floor. All conversation stopped. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me, a mixture of shock and apprehension. Leo's face hardened, a mask of annoyance. Chloe shrank back slightly, her smile vanishing, while my mother just looked tired, as if my very presence was an inconvenience she had to endure. I held a single small box wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with twine. I placed it gently in the center of the table, directly in front of Leo. He blinked, his mouth slightly agape, lightly. What is this, Ilara? He asked, his voice tight. I looked him squarely in the eye, my own voice low and firm, cutting through the silence. It's a belated Christmas gift from Dad. I didn't wait for their reaction. I didn't need to see their faces as they processed my words. I simply turned and walked away. As I reached the front steps, the silence behind me finally broke. I heard the sharp scrape of a chair, a confused murmur from my mother, and Leo's panicked voice. Wait, what is this? I didn't stop. I just kept walking into the cold, sharp air, the night a welcome cloak around me. Inside that box was a copy of the will. The original letter from my father and the old front door key. It wasn't an act of malice. It was an act of truth. The call started the next morning. First, it was my mother, her voice a flustered whisper on my voicemail. Alara, honey, we read what you left. It's a lot to take in. I think we all just need to talk. There was no apology, just shock at being caught. Then came a text from Leo. Can we meet? There's been a huge misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. He was trying to reframe reality even now. Chloe's contribution was the most pathetic of all, a single sad face emoji. Nothing more. Leo tried again a few days later, this time with a different approach. Remember that time we built the snow fort? We were a team then. We can be again. Dad would want us to be a team. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. He was weaponizing a memory he had long since betrayed. For a week, I let their messages pile up unanswered. Their words were hollow. Bitterness hadn't ruined our family. Their erasure had. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to go back. So I didn't block their numbers. I didn't argue or defend myself. I just stopped responding. My silence, I think, unsettled them more than any accusation ever could. The desperation escalated. A week later, Leo showed up at my office downtown unannounced. My assistant, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah, sent him away before I even knew he was there. He didn't look like someone you'd want to see, she told me later. And I knew she was right. Finally, my mother called again. This time I answered. Her voice was fragile, laced with a desperation I'd never heard before. Ilara, I think we made mistakes, she stammered. But this family, it's still yours too. I waited a beat, letting the silence stretch. Then I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion. I was always there. Mom, you all just lived easier when I wasn't. She didn't respond. Not because she disagreed, but because there was nothing left to say. 3 weeks after that final silent phone call, I mailed one last envelope. There was no return address. Inside, there was no angry letter, no final accusation. There was only the original photograph of my father and me, the one taken that summer. I helped him rebuild the back fence, the one that had been quietly removed from the hallway wall. I didn't need to include a note. The photo said everything. A week later, a text message came from my old neighbor. She hadn't asked, she just thought I'd want to know. It was a picture of the photo I had sent. It hadn't been rehung in the pristine, staged living room or in the dining room where they held their hollow celebrations. It was in the one place that was still truly my father's sanctuary, the old tool shed behind the garden. There it was tacked, slightly crooked above his workbench, surrounded by the familiar clutter of his life's work. Just a girl and her father, shoulder to shoulder, smiling, like the world made perfect sense. I stared at the image on my phone for a long time, and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. That house might belong to me on paper, but I understood then that my real inheritance wasn't brick or timber. It was this quiet, undeniable acknowledgement. The real legacy was the truth, and the truth doesn't need an audience to exist. It doesn't vanish just because it's ignored. I never needed them to admit what they did. I still live my own life in a city that feels like mine. Sometimes people ask if I ever reconciled with my family. I tell them I was always part of the story. They just tried to write around me, editing me out of the inconvenient scenes. But they don't get to hold the pen anymore. I was never asking to be the main character. I just wanted to exist. And now, finally, in the quiet peace of my own life, I do.